like for a week.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 20th meeting of the Hyde Park Planning Board. Please take note of all the exits around the room and now join us as we salute the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a new public hearing for the Asahi Shuzo Sake Brewery to be located where we used to have a Stop and Shop at 5 St. Andrews Road. Making a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So just to reiterate, we last saw the applicants on February 20th, at which time we circulated for comments from Dutchess County Planning as required. They responded in a matter of local concern. And at the February 20th meeting, we reviewed what basically had been submitted to be changed, which was removing about 9 feet of the wood cladding in the Engawa over one side, the changes of access to the Rice Polishing Building. They added a canopy over the door facing St. Andrews, a couple less parking spaces. There were other minor alterations to the entry. In looking back at the notes, the board had no issues with any of the changes. However, at the time, there was an issue about the wastewater treatment facility and the accessory structure. The maximum height that was allowed is 22 feet. This is proposed at a little more than 35, even sunk down some. So TAD was of the opinion that this was going to require an area variance. However, in a remarkable bit of change, Mr. Zarin was able to communicate to Ms. Moss that the actual wastewater facility is going to be treated differently. It's going to become part of the educational and interpretive experience for visitors. It'll be how they dispose of the waste will be shown from a live feed inside the building. So we haven't received it yet from Ms. Moss, but Ms. Moss did communicate to me, and I think I forwarded on to everybody this morning that she is no longer of the opinion that it's going to be requiring a variance, which gets you back into the fast lane.
Thank you.
But would you like to add something else, Ms. Roberts? I'm sorry, I kind of usurped.
I guess the only thing that maybe we want to explain is why it would be shown on a live feed rather than having
Sure.
a tour. And I think...
Actually, I think I can answer that myself. The
verticality,
verticality,
yes,
it has
sorry.
to.
You can pull it up.
You couldn't stand at a window and look because that's why it has to be so tall.
Right, so the equipment is very high up, so a window where people could pass by and look through, they're not going to see anything. So the client had the idea of doing live feed cameras within the facility that would play on television screens somewhere within the main building so that when persons are doing tours, they can see what's happening and a tour guide can explain the process. And we could also have some sort of writing underneath the screen that generally explains the wastewater treatment process.
I think this is great. I appreciate the nimble thinking on both sides. That includes TAD's as well.
Yep.
I mean, I had tried, let me put it this way. It's rare that TAD changes her mind, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Do
Anything
you
else
do
you-
this in Japan also?
That I'm not aware of.
I don't,
I can certainly find out.
we can ask.
Just a
but-
curiosity question.
Remember when they had the flood?
Yes.
The thing that was affected was their
Was
wastewater
this,
treatment
right.
plant. So whatever they have there now is brand new.
And it was buried, it was,
It was pretty low.
yeah.
Because the river came down and just washed it away.
Mr. Zarin can answer that question too. I believe he's going to Japan shortly to tour the original site.
Yes.
Any other comments from you guys?
Not from us.
Any comments from the consultants? Any comments from the board?
That was
Nope.
my one and
I like
only.
it.
That's great.
Would anyone from the public like to speak about this application? Okay, there being none, let me get a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we'll take action. We didn't have time to prepare a resolution because we didn't get anything from TAD. She was at Stormwater and MS4 meeting all day today. But once she has something for us, then Victoria can prepare a resolution. And you don't have to come back unless you just take a joy in coming up this far to see us. And we look forward to letting this continue on. Just as an aside, the comments from Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority were a little bit alarming to some of us because it suggested they didn't have the capacity for the 187,000 water drawdown. So do you want to give us an update on that? Pass that bug, pass that bug.
They're not that alarming. Essentially, F&T, our MEP subcontractor who had prepared the report, used the wrong water number. And the water, I mean, that's simple. They just simply made a miscalculation as to what the water demand is. It's a little more than we had calculated because of all the sinks and fixtures but it's in the ballpark of what we'd include in the EAF. So we're in the process of responding to that. We'll have an updated and corrected number. We've talked to them on several occasions on what's required to respond to the letter, and I don't think there's any issues other than that, which alarmed us.
That was the only one.
Which alarmed us too when we saw that. We were
When I
like,
read
where
that they
did this-
have to evaluate capacity to see if they can even provide the 187,000.
Yeah, well, we were like, wait a minute. And then honestly, on my part, I was going, now, why didn't I catch that when the letter went out? But I obviously didn't.
What was the magnitude of difference?
Oh, like 4 times.
A little over 4 times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
think
think
that-
they're down around 10,000, 11,000 now.
Yeah,
So they
but
made a
Okay.
big mistake.
yeah, there was a big mistake. Just that simple. And
I thought maybe it was a typo, because I thought there's
Nah,
no way
it's
that
just
they wouldn't have known
miscalculation.
for 187,000 gallons.
But I will tell you that our number was wrong too, because we didn't account for the actual water that becomes sake. So we were off about 1,000 gallons a day on that. So we're going to get an updated number into them.
Great, great. So otherwise, if you want to come back, let me know, but there shouldn't be any reason to. We'll forward the resolution to you.
Sure. The only other thing I wanted to update on was in Tad's letter, and that was about the wastewater treatment plant and outside permitting that it might need from other agencies. And we had put in our letter this afternoon, I just don't know if everybody got a chance to see it, that we have submitted in October of 2018
Yes.
our Speedies permit application, and there's been a ton of back and forth with DEC, and as the wastewater treatment plant evolves, the DEC is being kept apprised, and we don't expect there to be any issues.
Great. Generally, I believe, and Pete can correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be a protocol between DEC and DOH where Department of Health or Community and Behavioral Health actually does some evaluation of the functionality of the system.
Yeah.
And
And then
then,
the DEC will issue the permit.
so just bear that in mind as you go along, that you should keep both agencies
Yeah,
involved.
Chazen's up on that.
Yeah,
They're-
well, I figured, but
Yeah.
putting it on the record, that's all. So thanks very much. It's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you very much.
We're gonna take this up real third.
Yeah, but it's just, it won't be, it's not.
Yeah, just,
And then just for the edification of our newer members, once we close the public hearing, I believe that statutorily we're allowed 60 days in which to take action.
62.
62 days, sorry, thank you very much for correcting me on that. The next item on the agenda is a workshop for Lumens Holdings SINON Farm Solar.
See you still.
I believe the applicants may be outside.
Yep, they're here.
There's Ms. Crawford. Ms. Crawford, you're up. So for the audience, the applicants are seeking approval, a site plan and special use permit approval to create a solar farm or solar array at 619 Salt Point Turnpike. This is roughly the southeast corner of where South Quaker Lane ends, dead ending into Salt Point Turnpike. We had an earlier workshop that was sort of pre-application in some ways to give some direction back and forth. And after listening to our comments and also reviewing the comments from Ms. Axelson, our consultants, they gave us a new plan set. And Ms. Crawford, I'll let you take it over from there.
Yeah, I think Dave's coming in.
And if you could use the walking
Yeah.
microphone there. Thank you.
Good to see everyone. Thanks for getting us on the agenda.
Of course.
All right. Well, once again, I'm Jen Crawford with Crawford Associates Engineering. I'm here with Renewa Energy, but Dave is outside, I think, talking to some of the neighbors still, so we'll move on. And this is Peter of Omni. If you want to introduce yourself.
Peter McAuliffe from Omni Navitas. Again, we are the developer who's been coordinating with the landowner. You know, we're obviously working closely with Crawford and Renewa, as I know everyone here knows. But
Thank you.
yeah.
Right. So we've proposed a 2-megawatt AC project in the Greenbelt zone. As you mentioned, we have a feel for where it is. It's at 619 Salt Point Turnpike. Could you flip to the proposed site plan? Thank you. Yeah. And so based on your feedback, we've done a lot of work. So I'll highlight some of the differences. One of the things was we actually went and did a delineation. I think there was a little confusion in the first submission. This isn't a redelineation, it's just the first delineation. The first plans were based on the National Wetlands Inventory. So we've actually gone out and delineated. This is approximate locations. I was told that the surveyor just finished their field work this week. So in the next plan set, we should have the actual flags and the actual location. But this is approximately where it is from the field notes. So we've got a wetland that they identified coming along here with an intermittent drainage path, I guess. And then the wetland comes to about here on this side. We didn't delineate the east side because we're also not, proposing to go over there. So we just delineated this west side of this wetland. And then there's a third wetland kind of in the swale along the road here in the northwest corner. So we revised the layout to avoid the wetlands. And we also revised the entrance per some of your comments so that we weren't trying to come in off of this really congested driveway. And also that avoids crossing a wetland by coming in off of the residential driveway. We talked to the landowner. They were okay with that plan. And so we'll be proposing to come in off of this driveway here. And then this is actually an existing farm tractor road. So we're just going to try to improve that a little bit with the pervious drive that you guys had seen before. Let's see, we added some screening, predominantly on the west side with a little bit in the southwest corner as recommended. We had not proposed screening at the north, but I hear we're going to get a lot of feedback on screening today. But there is already a hedgerow
part of that's because
here.
the north side you have labeled as a side yard setback. It actually should be a rear yard.
Right, I saw that. I just got the comment letter as I was walking out the door today.
And the setbacks are they're
So I
different
just scanned
size,
it.
so it's going
Okay.
to increase the size, I believe, from 25 to 50.
Okay.
And I believe you're going to hear maybe some board members that they'd like to see more screening in through there. That's all.
Right. And then some other things that we had added to the most recent submission include the visibility community character assessment. We provided a glare analysis. We added the landscaping. We submitted a draft O&M contract and decommissioning agreement. And we provided the abutters list so that you could notify prior to the public hearing. And so today we're hoping that we get more feedback on what you would like to see. I expect a lot on visual screening, but also we hope that we've satisfied what you need to circulate to declare lead agency, schedule a public hearing, and then after we get some of your comments, I did quickly go through Liz's letter this evening before I came, and so I have a couple questions to clarify before we go tonight.
That was very good if you had the time to go through that, because I barely made it
Yeah.
myself through the whole thing.
I was eating dinner as I
And
did
I'm not
it.
driving down where you are, so.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe that you've permitted sufficient detail for us to circulate. We're prepared to take action tonight as well as set a public hearing. And before I turn it over to the consultants, I do want to say that the layout appears more compact. I think the access avoids a lot of the problems that you heard before. I personally like the screening, but a few others were like, no. So we're prepared to make some comments suggesting that as well. I did one quick question. I assume that these are where you've left out the arrays? This is
Here,
because it's rock? Bedrock?
it's steep, and we don't really want to do any grading.
There's no grading proposed.
There's
that's
no
all.
grading proposed, and that's just to minimize disturbance to the site. And so that's, we just decided to avoid that spot.
That's great.
There is some rock.
Well, there's rock a lot of places in Hyde Park. That's what we're known for, so. But the reason why I ask is you may have to relocate some of the arrays up here to accommodate the setback unless you want to get a variance. So it's just something to consider where you might try to relocate, because I'm aware that there's a certain amount there's a size that you need to get to, so this makes money for you guys as well as operates as long as it needs to, et cetera. So without further ado, Ms. Axelson.
So, yeah, ditto what Michael said about the redesign on the access was great. You got a nice layout there. I appreciate you noting those streams. I figured they might have been old farm streams or something like that. And there are a few more items looking ahead that we're going to need in order to get to neg deck, but I basically understand that the planning board could be ready to go ahead and circulate for leads, set a hearing tonight, et cetera, and then we keep pulling things together. On the archaeological and historical, I realized there were concerns on the part of the applicant about having to do a Phase 1A. So we tried to come up with an approach which would involve circulating to OPRHP and just see what they say. So we'll see how that goes.
Is that a requirement of the planning board?
What, to refer to OPRHP?
Yeah,
In a case-
even though it's not registered.
Yeah, in a case, well, it's generally we circulate just for any archaeological sensitivity at all. I'm guessing that they're not going to have any issues. This is just a guess. It's a farm, so it's usually already been disturbed, tilled, operated.
Well, that, and it didn't pop up as a yes on the FEAF. so-
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we said in the comments the first time around, was that it doesn't show up on the EAF mapper program as being archaeologically or historically sensitive. And the only reason I raised it at all is because of the 1790 farmhouse.
Right.
And my experience with other properties that have an older house like that, so. Just, so the board can address whatever they need to address. We're recommending that you confer with DOT, see if you need to do anything with them.
Actually,
Earlier rather than later is probably better.
sorry, one thing I forgot. I have some more paperwork to submit. It just shows some of our initial conversations with the DOT and some back and forth we had with the DEC, which got us nowhere so far, but there you go.
So oftentimes, until we refer it, there isn't a lot of,
Yeah.
particularly for something like this.
And then,
Sorry, OPRHP, is that SHPO?
yeah,
Okay.
Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. Sorry, I should have said that in my commentary.
Don't forget to use your microphone.
Yes.
Without getting into the nitty-gritty, basically, we were looking at the zoning table, happened to be here at a meeting, Tad was here, and I was originally going to guess that the two front yards would be obviously on the road frontages, and that the rear would possibly have been the east side, but because the address is on the state road, the rear line ends up being the northern property line. And so then we started looking at that. So the way I worded the comment is that either you could reconfigure the array and the fence, or go for a variance. Now, one thing to note, the wetlands that you have there are not, they're not DEC, so they don't have a buffer, so you may have a little wiggle room there. So that's one way of handling that. And I'm just looking.
On that note, it's been my experience that the ACOE has been ruling that they generally don't find that the post-driven panels in a wetland would warrant a permit. If we were to expand, say, into the wetland just with panels, is that something that would require further scrutiny from the town of Hyde Park?
You mean
or
the
would you
panels
defer
would
to the federal
overhang the wetland, or the post would be in the wetland?
Well, it's a pretty narrow wetland here, so it's likely that we could span it. But
Is it a wetland or a stream?
it was delineated as a wetland surrounding a stream.
Because if
And-
it's a stream under our code, you cannot put your panels in it.
But can we put them over top of it?
We have a setback from
For streams.
from
of-
certain streams.
Certain
so-
streams, but
Well,
this,
this is-
no, these would
this
be
has to
like
be a
intermittent.
DEC.
Intermittent
It has to be a
streams? These are intermittent.
DEC classified
Okay,
stream. This is not a
intermittent,
DEC
Right.
classified stream.
Yeah,
so
these
it
are
wouldn't
only
apply
federal,
here.
not, yeah.
Okay.
And
Right.
not
being
DEC.
honest, this is a low-quality wetland. There's not much value to it ecologically. It's got some hydrophytic vegetation, which makes it a wetland. It's got periodic inundation. That's really it.
Right.
It's going to have some spring rain and then kind of mostly dry up.
So the board would have to consider that. If you propose it, they'd have to consider the impacts under seeker.
Right. But generally speaking, we would refer to ACO. This is our first time to hear that the Army Corps has taken a position of any kind on these.
Yeah.
We haven't had anything proposed inside a federal wetland, even a sort of semi-degraded one like this, but we would just
Right.
have to refer it to them to get.
Yeah,
some sort of
yeah,
comment.
it is a
And there's only one
finding.
guy who reviews all this.
What's that?
There's only one person for the Army Corps of Engineers who reviews these, as far as I know.
Oh, well.
So that can sometimes take a while, is what I'm saying. So-
Okay. Well, we'll think about that, and that might be the solution, or maybe we'll go for a variance. I want to consult with the contractor
Sure,
in particular, because working around a wetland can be,
It's a
you know,
significant variance.
tricky as well. So.
A significant variance.
Okay, sorry.
I don't know what happened. And that would involve, I know that I worded in my comments to move the fence out, or you'd have to get a variance for that. So it's kind of both, and we figured give you a heads up sooner rather than later. I won't go into detail on the landscaping. We did take a close look at disturbance and coverage, and we have some questions about that. But basically, we're confident that it looks like it's around 10% impervious, which is well within the requirement, so there's no big issue there. We just need some more clarity on that.
Liz, could I could you clarify? I'm pretty sure that screening or vegetation or trees, plantings would not be required to get a variance within the setback. Is that true?
Well, I think we still want the buffering up there.
Well, for example, I think we're proposing.
You mean on the north?
Screening on the west within the setback.
No, so landscaping can go in.
Right, that's what I wanted to
No
confirm.
variance required
Yep.
whatsoever.
Right.
Structure.
It's not a structure,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's fine. Good question. Let's see. And then we need a few more things, notation and details having to do with the solar law. And I know that you gave us an O&M document and another decommissioning document. What we were kind of looking for is somewhere along the lines of either narrative that kind of follows the decommissioning items in the code. Another thing that other applicants have done is they will have a decommissioning plan sheet that highlights, the different items that would be removed as part of decommissioning and puts plan notation right in there. So that's another way to handle it.
I think I sent it over to Jen, but we can provide a detailed breakdown of everything, that needs to be removed, the cost, the hourly, rate of the worker. So that's definitely
Right.
something we can provide.
Yeah, and I know that we probably have samples of other plan submittals that have put together, like a drawing that's called a decommissioning plan with all
Right.
that notation, so. I'm assuming the board would be okay with offline consultation
I
as
think
needed.
that's a great idea.
Because they've made a lot of progress on the plans. And then the seeker items, again, getting the wetland delineation map, which we understand is in the works, hearing about Blanding's turtle mitigation and adding narrative to the EAF and maybe putting notation on the plans as needed. U.S. Fish and Wildlife letter. Those are kind of the big seeker items.
They're not seeking anything from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, am I correct?
We don't think that that's required for anything else, any of our other approvals outside of this one. I think we had talked about.
Yeah, as I said,
typically
from what I
required,
understood, it was the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that sometimes required this, but it depends on what kind of financing you're seeking.
Perhaps. As far as we know, we checked with NYSERDA, or Dave, you want to address that?
Yeah, we checked with NYSERDA, and they said that it's not a requirement from their end.
Yeah.
For them, I guess it's something we typically get in seeker review.
No, we don't ever circulate to Fish and Wildlife.
I don't mean circulate to them, just to have them get the letter and.
We don't usually have letters from U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Right.
It's DEC.
Only in the two past solar projects.
Because
they were required
they
to
started
get
that
them.
themselves, in other words. They're not, U.S. Fish and
If
Wildlife
you don't
isn't really on
want
our,
it,
it's
that's
not on our
fine.
circulation list.
I thought you'd want it for seeker.
They're not typically on our circulation list, that's why. As I said before, their kind of environmental mapper just looks at the whole county. The DEC mapper is much more specific to
Well,
parcels, et cetera.
if you don't want that item, then there's no need for them to address it.
I don't think we need it. Does the rest of the board, because we're circulating to DEC on this for endangered, threatened, and rare species.
So technically, it's a federal agency, so it's not a seeker
Right.
agency for purposes of seeker. But in the past, because they've been providing information to the applicant, you've waited to do your seeker review so that you had a full scope of information. In this case, the applicant is saying they are not consulting with them.
But the
last two applicants, the reason why they did that was because of forest cover,
It was
and they were
required.
looking for certain types of bats, and they don't have this type of geography on their property. But that's specifically why those two did, because they needed additional information, not the Indiana bats, but the the long-eared bats. So
So we'll just,
northern long-eared.
we'll look for that in the next middle.
Right. But this is a completely different piece of land.
Right, and I'll point out, too, that we didn't even know they'd contacted U.S. Fish and Wildlife until they told us to correct our secret declaration, which my blood boiled over. So, in other words, because we weren't told, we then started asking, are you in touch with U.S. Fish and Wildlife? Well, yes, we are. We mentioned this to them as well, but they're the first ones out of all the other applications that are not seeking some sort of approval or guidance from them. So I think we can rely on, I believe we can rely on DEC because I think it's actually a better agent. Let me rephrase that. It's a different agency, and it's more specific to our land, our topography, et cetera, because it's more detailed information than what, Fish and Wildlife, I mean, was pretty vague. They didn't even pick up, they got a bog turtle as well on the last one. We had the same issue. And, you know, we've been trained to look at habitat. It was pretty extreme that there would be habitat for bog turtles there. But so at any rate, I don't think we need it.
Okay.
I'll defer to the rest of my colleagues as well.
And then the only other thing, I know that when I was having a conversation with Tad, the reason that we are looking for more clarity on disturbed area had to do with the fact that it's 0.88 acres of disturbance, and the concern is, okay. So.
Mr. Sotero.
Is it my turn? Hi, Jen.
Hi. So do we have a comment letter from you, or you must be the
Well,
engineer?
Oh,
okay, so
with
you
her.
did.
They're a package deal.
Got
We're a
it.
package
Well,
deal.
I remember in the last one, it said, you know, engineer comments will be coming, and I wasn't sure if we ever got them yet.
Well, I mean, typically on these, there's really not that many. Typically, what we get involved in is if there's a stormwater pollution prevention plan.
Right.
So I just asked Liz if we had one, and she just had mentioned about the point, you know, like 8.8. But, I mean, just doing some quick calcs and the footprint and for, you know, the landscaping, I mean, there's gonna have to be like machinery in there that's gonna be digging like trenches and all that stuff. So, I mean, you know, just the footprint of this and the access road and the trees were at about 10 acres. So now I know that that's not all actual disturbance.
Right.
But I think you're gonna be well over the acre. However, a couple of the recent solar applications that we have, you know, before other ones, there's a section in the DEC regs, and I don't know it right off the top of my head because I don't do this stuff every day anymore. But there's a section in the regs that they had quoted where if you're not increasing the pre and post by 5%, that you just have to do a basic sediment and erosion control plan, not the full SWIP. So we can send you, if you're not sure where that is, but there's a section that the other engineers for the other solar applications had, you know, like quoted. So what they did was they did a pre and post, you know, to prove that out, and we looked at it and either said yes or no, that makes sense. And actually in both cases, you know, like it did. So they didn't have to do the full SWIP, but just do a, you know, erosion control plan. So
Sure.
We're probably going to ask you like to look at that, you know, and do that.
Sure, I can comment on that. So first of all, we do include erosion and sediment control plan. Here. Yes, here. And with corresponding notes. So we just generally do a notes on drawing version of that. But that's actually just for good practice, and I know we need a permit from the town.
Right.
So with respect to the SWIP, there has been guidance issued by the DEC. It came out in April 2018 that kind of further solidified their stance that PV panels are not impervious surfaces,
Right.
That general construction activity should not be considered disturbance, and so forth. And so that's kind of the guidance that we use to base our
Okay,
disturbance
could you send
calculations.
us that?
So yeah, I'll
Send like Liz
submit that in
All
our
right, and
next
then we'll
part.
take a look at it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay.
Can you phrase that again for me real quickly before we move on, for my notes are accurate? You said the solar panels or the solar posts are not considered disturbance per se by the DEC?
No, the
Installing?
posts are considered disturbance, you know, that
Right.
much. But the modules themselves are not considered impervious surfaces because the rainwater can run off of them, sheet flow underneath the road next to them. And so the area, for the most part, underneath them can still absorb water. So from a stormwater perspective, they're not impervious surfaces.
And by the way, I'm not sure how the disturbance can be the exact side of the pole. Presumably, they dig a little bit around it.
I mean, between, the conduit and the, whatever.
Right, and then on
But
the
if they issued-
conduit.
But,
oh.
if they issued something, then,
We
Right.
actually have been, when we walked Athanas West, there's areas where it's wet. We
Really
were wondering
wet.
what the DEC position would be, because the state's encouraging this, and this is, in the long run, good for the environment. So we kind of guessed it's sort of like farming. They take a position that this might trump the value of the wetland, so we'll see.
And then kind of along the lines of trenching, I wanted to further clarify that the majority of the wiring would be contained in integrated cable trays in the racking. So
Okay.
it's mostly,
So
so
they're
everything
off the
east-west
ground.
is above grade.
Okay.
And so we show an underground line
Right.
along
Okay.
here,
Right.
and then also along here just to connect, so we, are avoiding this knoll. And so the calculations we provided included this
Okay.
trench.
all right,
So-
okay, good, thank you for
Yeah.
clarification.
And then you have a trench line from that to the pole as well, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which was counted.
Glad I need to check my math. I sometimes need to check my math.
So Peter, just to clarify,
Yes.
you inputted comments for the initial letter that we received? the
I mean, honestly,
five
there's really
pages?
not many engineering comments here.
Because
It's
there's no gra-
mostly,
there's no
mostly
grading.
planning type
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, we'll take a look at the soil and erosion control plan, but I'm sure it's fine. If we happen to see anything, we'll just shoot you an email, Jen. We're not
That'd be
gonna-
great, yeah.
All right, I mean, I'm sure it looks like good. You guys know what you're doing, but we'll
Great.
take a quick look at it.
Thanks.
It's been a little busy lately.
Thank you. Ms. Polidoro, any comments?
So, since you're talking about coverage, just under our local code, the town does count the surface of the panels as coverage. And so that's one of the calculations that you still need to provide to show
Right,
the number.
that was actually tricky because the code categorizes them as coverage, but it doesn't categorize them as impervious surfaces. And it doesn't have a definition that,
If you look at the solar law, it does.
I did, actually. But definitely point out the specific
But-
section.
I mean, we're telling you we need that calculation, so we can talk about it afterwards.
It's, I tried to cite it so that you would have it handy. If you look at my comment number 13, D, refer to code chapter 130, section 130-6I.
Right. I guess when I read the one online, it said that that was lot coverage, which is not exactly the same as impervious surface.
I can find it after the meeting
We'll
and
Sure.
go
get back
through,
to
because
you.
I know that that's.
They do need to be counted. So that's one of the things we need. We also need to know whether you're going for a variance or reconfiguring the property. One thing I didn't think that I saw in here was discussion about impact on agricultural soils. This is an ag district, and there's nearby farm operations, and so that's something the board has to consider as part of its seeker review. So impact on this operation as well as nearby operations. Another thing I didn't.
Sorry, quick question on that. So you need an ag data statement?
Well, I think you gave us the ag data statement, but we need to understand, what kind of, are these good, important soils? If so, are they staying on site? What are you
Right.
doing with them? Are you using pesticides, which are going to impact those soils, et cetera? So just some kind of narrative explanation of.
The state establishes two kinds of important soils. And in other words, what we want to know is, if the soils are here, is there going to be a way to preserve and protect so that they don't get carted off or something like that?
I think the soils would
It
be
may-
be on that
described in the
statement.
FEAF. right?
The EAF indicates that you have the high-quality soils.
Right.
It's like 1.7 something.
we don't
but
know
we don't
where.
Right, what she said.
Okay, so what you're asking for is the map from Web Soil Survey
Where
of
they're
which
located
ones.
in.
And
Okay.
again, a narrative explanation of is affirmative statements that you will be keeping the soils on the property. What, are you stockpiling them? What are you doing? How are you treating them?
Okay, we can add the soils to the ESC plan.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I didn't quite understand your comment.
Sorry, just to go back 1 second. In general, we don't take soils off properties.
So then if you put an affirmative statement on that says all
Yeah.
topsoil to remain,
That's
That's fine.
that's something that we need, but
Yeah, okay.
I'm on the county planning board as well, and we evaluate purchase of land development rights for agricultural resource protection. And I get data all the time when we see these, some are as small as 40 acres, some are as big as 400, 500 acres. They tell us what the exact percentage is of statewide important soils for agriculture. Then there's another subcategory. So we look at that. It's one of the metrics we use to try to decide whether we're going to use county resources to purchase this in the first place, because it's the better the soils, the more we're supposed to be protecting them in terms of the county perspective too.
Right. And then I can also comment that it's currently used for unimproved pasture, which,
Yes.
you know, the Department of Ag and Market has issued guidance where they kind of rank the value, and unimproved pasture is pretty low. So we
But
can comment on that in the next
That's also the
letter.
current use. It's also just thinking as planners, what could be the future uses here if it ever came back to it. Because we don't really have a lot of great arable soils in Hyde Park because we have so much rock and wet.
Mhm.
So you mostly find the better farm productions to the east and to the north. I mean, Red Hook is complete with them. The town actually has prioritized which farms they want to preserve first, then second, then third. So we don't have a lot. If we have anything good over here, let's try to keep it. That's what we're saying.
Just quickly, speaking of soils, I noticed when we were looking at the fact that you might have to maybe push the array down, there's an area south of the array and the fence, and I don't know if you can, you know, push the array down there a little bit to be able to meet the rear property line.
Do you mean back here?
And I don't know what that area of the site is used for. In other words, do the property owners already use that as pasture or something like that? But that was a thought that we had.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, you know, the property owners do have a residence to the south, so I think to try and appease their wishes as much as possible, we want to push it as far north as we can. But I think, you know, taking into account the new light you've shed on the setbacks, you know, that'll be something we'll have to discuss and look at closely, for sure. Yeah.
I just have one final question. Well, two comments. I take it back. One, I didn't quite understand the comments on the use of the pollinator mix. You said that you didn't want to disturb the soils. Are you using it or not using it?
We are. We're using it as needed. You know, obviously, there are more competent and less competent equipment drivers, operators. And as a part of the erosion and sediment control plan, it is our specification that if there is disturbance, if there is rutting that wasn't intended, that it be repaired, that it be temporarily stabilized, it be reseeded, and it be brought back.
So I don't
so
think
in that case, we would be using the seed mix that was specified.
the comment wasn't just limited to disturbed areas. What we've had done in the past is, as mitigation and to encourage pollinators, the area under the panels, instead of keeping it grass, that has been planted with the pollinator mix.
Right. We still feel that it is in the best interest of the project to not disturb more than we have to. And so to try to promote the pollinators, that's kind of why we included some flowering elements in the landscaping plan, as maybe kind of a trade-off to still support the pollinators without you know, overly disturbing the site, which, you know, is more difficult for us. But it also, I mean, as far as I understand, when you open up a site, you invite invasive species, or it's more likely for them to take hold if you dig up the topsoil. And so there are a lot of reasons why we generally don't want to strip the site, but we're happy to include pollinator flowering
Azalea
plants
doesn't
along
really
the
qualify
perimeter.
as a pollinator, sorry. It blooms too early in the season.
Oh,
And
okay.
Forsythia doesn't do anything because it blooms before the leaves are on and before the insects are flying. The advantage of a pollinator mix is that you have a successive flowering throughout the season, so that as various species of butterflies, et cetera, go through, they're able to take advantage depending on what their roaming habit is. So the board should consider that, because we did require these pollinator mixes before. I'm not really sure that you need to do a lot of disturbance for the pollinator mix. The seeds that we used before can basically almost just be
Just go on top.
scattered.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That
they're
works.
wildflowers and they reseed.
They make the thing where you spray it.
Yeah,
and
you just, there's different ways you
coat
can
it.
do this, but it doesn't necessarily mean removing topsoil. And, I mean, Lord knows, we don't want to see another bunch of ailanthus growing up over here either. I mean, there's, the invasives that are here are really bad, so, all of them are bad, put it that way. So particularly the ailanthus, because it runs so well, it's a tough thing to fight. But I would just suggest you look at that. Sorry, my words. Ms. Weiser, comments?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry,
Oh,
just one
yes,
one last thing about the
that's
LLC.
right. Sorry.
It doesn't seem like you're registered to do business in the state of New York, so that's something that you're gonna have to look into.
Which company is that?
Not you.
Lumens
Yeah, so
Holdings,
that's a special purpose entity, formed by Omni Navitas, so we'll ensure that's square.
Yeah, I can provide
and you just might need to register.
background
I mean, we can
information on
find
that.
it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments from the consultants? Ms. Weiser, comments?
So, I think you'll be hearing about screening from most everyone tonight, and I agree with what I expect to hear from my colleagues, that screening is absolutely critical to this project, but I will leave the specifics to those who know more about gardening or planting than I do. So.
Any other comments, Ann?
Nope.
Thank you. Mr. Pickett?
Okay, my concern is primarily around the glare analysis. Obviously, east to west, you won't have it to the north, not to the south, and you've stated in here that you would prevent glare affecting any residences and travel on South Quaker Lane. So that's what I'll be keying on.
Thank you.
Sorry, was that a concern or
That would be his concern.
Or concern.
oh, okay.
Yes.
I'll be focused on that one.
You'll be
yes,
focused, okay.
yes.
In other words,
A lot of us drive on Quaker Lane.
Yeah.
You don't want to create any accidents. You don't want to create any problems.
Right.
for
I mean,
any
I
of
would
the
add
residents.
that it's very similar to what you might experience if you were driving next to a pond. It's if it,
Depends
a
upon the
flat,
time of
glassy
day
surface
and-
reflects.
Would the
It's
board
similar.
want to find a consultant to review the applicant's glare analysis?
I think that's a
Good
good idea. That's a good idea. I mean, I looked at their glare analysis, but it's much skimpier than the ones we're used to seeing.
what person?
I mean, I don't, honestly, when I read these glare analyses, I mean, they kind of spell things out. You kind of have to sit and read it a couple times to get it, but I don't know if there are any kind of specialists that you could find, but they typically.
Whoever writes these up would be someone who'd be a specialist in reviewing them.
Peer
But-
review.
Yeah, the other thing is typically it's like a certain number of minutes per year for each item. Do you know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Right.
That's, like, they have to analyze. I can go back and look at it again, see if anybody in-house is any more specialized than that, but it did
Let's hear
seem
from
to
the board
address
on
the
that one. I read it
basics.
Well,
through and thought it was
they
pretty
do say
clear.
in there,
It
they're
seemed acceptable to me.
going to put in the vegetative screening to prevent glare from affecting residences and vehicle traveling on South Quaker Lane. Prove it.
Yeah. Mr. Pickett, just some feedback on that. So, if the board does decide to hire a consultant, we would just add that they have working knowledge of solar specifically. This is AR, anti-reflective glass. It's implemented into manufacturing. And, the intent there is to obviously absorb as much photons, as much sunlight without releasing any back. And so, we've cited these actually near airports and have qualified from a glare standpoint. So we appreciate the concern, but it's also a different technology than like a commercial building siding, glare impact.
I will add that at some point, you can't protect all glare from every point on a property. It's not possible. There are times when you're just walking and you'll see, you could be walking in a parking lot with cars and suddenly have the sun flash on the, a piece of metal on the car and go, whoa. But they're intermittent, as I understand it. You're talking, as I believe as Ms. Axelson said, about so many minutes per year. The one for Athanas West was very clear about there's one site that we're going to need screening for to prevent, because that house would actually pick up glare. But in these cases, owing to topography, it appeared as though it wouldn't impact any of the residences so much as it might a car, and that's why they're proposing the heavy screening. That's how I read the glare analysis report myself.
Right, and once again, it's, because we're not doing any grading, the modules are all going to be kind of a little bit different tilt, especially east to west. So I don't even anticipate it to be like one huge block of glare at exactly the slightly different, there's a little bit of undulation going along with the ground. So, like I said, I would relate it back to, a glassy pond, or traffic, or, we have a lot of reflective surfaces in our environment that we're used to.
We do.
So,
But can you check in-house to see if there's someone who would look at this?
Sure.
Since you're now part of CPL team with different consultants? Anything else, Mr. Pickett?
That's it.
Ms. Wasser?
Well, I have a concern about the screening, and I guess really just the question of the height when it's planted, what you're using, and then its growth maximum, and how long that takes. So I don't know if you want to just do that now, since we know we have abutters that are concerned, as well as some board members.
In the landscaping plan, it shows on the detail what the height and width are of each proposed
Right,
plant.
but I don't know if everybody has looked at that.
No, probably not.
In the audience, so we can wait for someone out there to ask it, or you could do it now.
well, it sounds like
There may be
we're
some changes
getting some
proposed.
other recommendations about what
Yes.
we'd propose anyway.
Right,
so.
there's not a public
Alright,
hearing, it's a
sorry.
workshop only, so
Thank you. My bad.
the public can speak in a month when we set the public hearing.
Okay, let's do that.
But in the meantime, we'll also make I think some changes have been proposed. They're in Ms. Ackleson's March 20th memo, basically to replace the hemlock with red cedar, eastern red cedar, so it's native, the idea being that it would look more natural that way. Also, you can prune cedar, you can top it off if they need to, and it just sends a new leader out over and over and stays. And red cedar spreads, so we'll have to watch that because it's not an invasive, but it does like to walk really far as it goes around. And then I think it was also a black spruce. Black spruces were suggested, which have a slow grow habit and can also be topped if they need to be.
I'm just trying to figure out where I put that comment.
It's number 8.
Thank you.
Not only did you
memorized it
read it all, you
I mean, I
memorized
just
it.
said black spruce and native red cedar.
Yes.
Forsythia is recommended for a necessary buffer along the southeastern corner of the array.
Also, red cedar and black spruce, the deer don't eat them, but deer love azaleas. So you probably have chewed up azaleas as you go, and the deer do not like forsythia, so that way you have screening that doesn't, from plants that are immune basically from the deer.
On the southeastern corner,
Right next to the fence. That's what the
So-
board was thinking, in other words.
so that's a really tough spot from a shading perspective to
What we
go very
suggested there was
close.
just forsythia.
Oh, right, and that's shorter, I guess. Okay.
That's
I
much
was
shorter.
concerned about if I don't want to add plantings to the wetland necessarily, so I don't want to go too far this way.
No,
so
no,
I'm
this
thinking
was like, just a
kind
little
of-
like, where the writing is there,
Okay.
maybe, again, this is so that the screening would be soft, there'd be like screening here between residential and non-residential uses, that's basically it.
Liz, can you speak to the resiliency of red cedar? And are they susceptible to lodia or other fungus-based?
I'm gonna turn
No.
back to
They-
Michael on that one.
They will not live forever. They
Sorry.
reach a maximum height, and then they'll live for a while, and they over. But they're fairly fast growing. So, but they will lose most of their lower branches over time, just like white pines.
Yeah.
So the screening they provide is ideally for, so is what it's suggested for over here. The topography changes over here. These houses are higher up. And so as these grow, they'll reach about a maximum height of about 20 feet at the most. I think that's plenty of clearance here to not throw shadow. That means that it will help. I don't believe any of the houses, if they're looking from the house, that they'll see this. But if they go into the front yard, looking down, they'll see it, and the trees will prevent, the cedars will prevent that from being seen.
I guess when we looked at the possibility of needing buffering from that general direction, I felt that the view of the existing farm was part of the character in that area, so we didn't want to bring any buffering forward.
Right.
Because it just would have seemed artificial in the
Well,
context.
and they
that's why we
but there's
looked at that.
paddocks here,
Right.
and they use that area.
Right, well, that's why we thought if it could be just kind of, I guess, smushed up against the fence or something like that, just to kind of soften the view from that particular angle.
Okay.
It's a new planning term.
Smushed.
Smush, I got it, technical term.
Ms. Wasser, any other comments besides the importance of screening? Good. Ms. Dexter?
Whatever you can decide on for screening is fine by me, because I don't know anything about planting. I am not concerned about glare. I think we'll all start to realize as we see more of these that they design these panels to absorb light, and that they're not trimming them out in, generally they don't trim them out in highly reflective materials, and I'm just not concerned at all. Otherwise, you know, there's just work that has to be done because of the nature of the project. Liz, you do a awesome job of getting it out in front early, which I think really helps, because you are, you know, right at the beginning of the official journey. So I think that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver?
Thank you very much for, you know, taking our ideas and bringing them to play here with the access and the layout. And I would also have to echo my colleagues with the importance of the screening, and I think it's extremely important. You look at the cedar and spruce mixture option, and, you know, I think that's really going to help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will add that Chris is a landscaper, so he's also one of our more knowledgeable people up here about plants.
Great.
Just so you know. Ms. DiNapoli?
To make it unanimous, landscaping is very important. The screening is critical for the success of the project. Also, my sincere thanks to Ms. Alkinson for producing a wonderful document that's easy
Very
to
detailed.
follow. Don't swell your head too much. And she's very.
Raises are
She
coming.
needs a pay raise,
Take it easy,
Mr.
Liz.
Because she just outlines everything very clearly and succinctly. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it?
That's
wow. Okay, so I have some quick comments that are a little bit more detailed. First, is this sheet C1.1, I believe?
Yes.
Okay, right over, let's see, am I still working?
I don't see heights. Did you turn it off? Shrubs. There it is.
Right over in here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to sound like a southerner, but you need to provide an inset detail or spec sheet for the pole-mounted utility meter, the pole-mounted utility recloser, the customer load break disconnect, and the customer recloser. I don't know what any of those are, but they're all outside the screening and visible, so we should know what they look like so that the board can evaluate for visual impacts.
Okay. How about with a photo of
Yeah,
what it
like
looks
a
like on
spec
another
sheet.
project?
A spec
work,
sheet,
maybe?
something just to show us, because,
Right.
again, they're located outside the proposed screening, so I couldn't figure out what they were.
Yeah, we can send photos. We haven't decided on the final specs yet, but.
Yeah, I mean,
That-
at the
that
end of
has
the
to do with
day,
the
it's
utility
up to the
company.
utility, and we kind of are at the whim of the utility on what goes there. And I will add
I
that
mean,
the
Central
reason.
Hudson is, you call it the utility?
Yes.
Yeah.
The utility.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I would
The
add
monopoly,
that
yeah.
they were cited in this location because the utility typically requires that they have access to maintain it.
Yes, the utility doesn't require, they don't care about aesthetics. Take a look at the bad
Yes.
limbing that's been done around here for our
Right.
street trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm not really fond of the Central Hudson making final decisions. The board needs to know what it is you're going to propose there. If they all look more or less alike, that's okay.
Right.
Yep.
But just because they like instant access doesn't mean that these,
Right.
that's where they should be ideally located or something.
Yeah, and to that end, I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, sometimes they won't make final decisions until the end, but we put the maximum amount of polls we've ever seen. It could be fewer than that, because we've gone through
You're
this
doing the
before.
worst-case scenario.
We're doing the worst case scenario because we've come into this situation before, and the fact of the matter is they won't tell us what they're going to need until later on. Until
Fun times for you guys.
It's great. It's really great. But so our strategy is to just, you know, make you aware of the worst that it could be, which is this many polls.
So we'll need to convey this to Ms. Moss, because Ms. Moss is sort of a strict constructionist.
Mhm.
If things are on the site plan that aren't there. Constructionist, the way she construes, sorry.
Okay, got it. I just want to make sure I got it.
The way she would look at this is if there are lots of changes, even if they're small, she usually kicks it back to us for a site plan amendment. I'd rather you not go through that.
Mm.
So the more specific that things are, they're supposed to be there, that we can.
Right.
So let's just, I'll tell Ms. Moss this myself,
Right.
that those may not be what's finally there.
Right. But at the worst, they would remove one of the many, is my anticipation.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
So are you prohibited from putting landscaping in front of those? features?
They need to be able to access it. We would be prohibited from putting landscaping as tall as them, because then that would interfere with the actual power lines and their ability to access it.
Could you give them access from the inside?
We'll
have to
review
talk
that.
to the utility?
We'll have to review that with the utility company, but we've never done that before. And they're very particular about what they will and won't.
Because, I mean, you're probably aware this is a very highly traveled intersection.
And Central Hudson doesn't care about things like that.
Well, right,
Yeah,
but
and
if they can put it on the inside of the screening, then at least it minimizes.
They tend to be in
That'd be better.
in the right of way, though. They tend to be not on the personal property.
It's just a question.
Yeah, and they need to
If
have
they can
an
give 'em an
easement to it, yeah. And I mean, for that matter, there is already a power line right here that's already impacting that view shed. So at least it's consistent, sort of, with what's already there,
Well,
a little bit.
But we don't want to add.
I mean, it's not like we're adding them to a road that doesn't have a power line
I'll say
yet.
this, when someone says, well, it can't get any worse, but then.
Yes, it can.
people- Thank you. It usually can,
We're
so.
not gonna add to it.
to
But
me-
it sounds like the next step is to submit some photos of, what it would look like. Okay.
I also want to just address sort of more broadly that so I think I sent this to you, Ms. Crawford, but the habitat assessments generally help guide. So if there's going to be a mitigated measure, the DEC says you have to put up standard protocols, put up a fence.
Mhm.
Where are you going to put it up? How do you know where to put it up?
Right, so we were proposing, it doesn't show up on this plan because we didn't actually get feedback from the DEC yet specifically, so we didn't put too much into it. But basically, we were going to propose installing a silt fence with a silt sock to prevent, to make sure they couldn't go under it. Because I know the silt fence buried properly isn't exactly tall enough for the
Yeah, they
landing
specify,
turtle.
you can't go to Home Depot, I've been told by several contractors, say, I need the DEC turtle fence. They don't know what that is.
Right, so.
The DEC does specify height and how much that
Yeah.
depth has to be.
So I guess I was anticipating that we would just surround the whole site, and that would cover our bases. I mean, a lot of it we were going to include anyway, just for erosion and sediment control. So it would really be just adding that.
Then we may, if it doesn't show up, but we're circulating to DEC, I'm not sure that maybe that we should have some sort of plan set that proposes that. The reason why I say this is we have a large hotel project going
Right.
up, and we kept getting the most vaguely worded letters from DEC. They weren't actually giving any direction about what was supposed to be done.
You've got about 2 of those in there.
So finally, I called up the meeting myself, because that's the advantage of being up here so long, as I know all the people there. And when we got there with the chastened biologists and the engineers, et cetera, they could have been very clear. What they were basically saying was, we know this isn't primary habitat, but it's roving habitat. What are you going to do to stop that? But that's all you needed to know. And I'm thinking in my head, put up a fence. So that was what was done. They proposed and they agreed. So it was very easy, but they weren't, sometimes the DEC is not directional.
Right.
And if they don't have, I mean, they already had an environmental assessment report submitted that basically showed that even though known turtle presence was within a mile, that this wasn't primary, and none of us, because of the way it was worded, and I take this pretty seriously, we all do up here. I couldn't figure out what they meant. I had to go
Right.
have a meeting with them, so I just want to avoid that.
Right.
In general with them, so is there any way that you don't propose this on any of the things? I wonder if we should maybe add a note or something to them for this?
Well, and we can also revise, our silt fence detail, or add one that shows, because it's not on here yet.
Right.
We were waiting to see
Correct.
whether they would agree with that, to show kind of the silt sock up against it, and then say, on here, see, detail whatever, and we'll call it.
I mean, ideally, they'll send back and say, oh, you'll have to do an incidental take permit unless you do this, 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 and this. But they didn't give us that direction. And this, I should add, slowed us down on the hotel review by about 4 months until I finally thought, okay, I just got to set this up. Why we had to speak in face-to-face, and I had to threaten with the governor and stuff to get all this. It was, because this is a priority project for the region to have it. And so once I used those terms, clarity appeared. I'm not going to be able to use that with this, although I can say this is part of the plan toward going 50%, whatever, within so many years. So, again, if there's a way that we could, I think that the DEC would look at this differently if they showed that you're already proposing something.
Okay.
I'm just trying to help. If you don't want to, we can circulate as is.
No, I mean, we had reached out to them and described the strategy. We hadn't drafted the detail yet. I felt like we got a little bit of the same runaround where it was a little vague and, you know, oh, you're not supposed to talk to me, you're supposed to talk to this person. Okay, great. You're not supposed to talk to me, you're supposed to talk to this person.
I think what the chairman is offering right now is the opportunity to hold off on circulation until you've submitted revised plans with turtle details. Right? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, thank you.
I think we prefer to circulate now.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
I brought it up. That's all I needed to do.
Okay.
So you're going to check the lot coverage when this is submitted and resolve the issue?
Liz going to check lot.
Yeah, I have Liz check lot coverage.
Coordinate on the
And the area of disturbance? Okay, because.
And I'm going to look into look in-house at CPL team to see if there's a glare specialist.
Because when I looked at what's proposed for disturbance, even I was shocked at just .88. It seemed like, again, when you were counting the pole as being just I think it was 2 feet or something, 4 by 4 or something, as just a disturbance, like, so there's not going to be any disturbance around that? They don't have to dig beyond that?
Well, I just did,
No,
as
I know it's hard to estimate, but.
As you guys were talking, I was just doing some stuff here. I mean, if you just take the access road that goes up through the middle, out to where, you know, the barns are, that in itself is 31,200 square feet. Now, if you count, and I was going to talk to Tad tomorrow, but if you count like a 20-foot wide swath by the length of the evergreens along Salt Point, that in itself is another 23,000. So you're already over the acre there. And then if you count, there's a temporary staging area and a stockpile area, so that's another. The construction area is another 19,000. So I get 1.68 acres.
So I think that
I gotta
we
email that to
actually,
Tad.
because we're using the pervious gravel road design, and because we specify specifically that they should not strip topsoil before putting the geotextile down and then the gravel that is pervious, we were not counting it as disturbance.
Yeah, we'll have to look at that. I kind of.
You guys just come to a meeting of the minds, you can discuss this offline.
Well, yeah, we
I
can-
can't like believe that that'll really happen, but, I mean, we can
We can have a conversation,
talk about
yeah.
it. But again, even if it is, you know, you can send me the information you have, and then
Yeah.
I'll find that section in the code. And, you know, it may just be that you have to do a quick pre and post and
Right.
prove there's the increase is not more than 5%. And then you're just doing the soil and erosion control anyways, which you already
Right.
have. So I don't think it's really a big deal one way or the other. So, but we'll work
Thank
it
you.
out.
So all my other comments were covered by my colleagues or a consultant. I don't believe I heard, I think it's in Liz's memo, but just to make certain you know, any chain link fence must be black under our
Yeah,
solar
they
law.
did it.
Thank you,
Yeah,
okay.
That's why it's not in my mind.
Thank you very much.
So
I asked this.
I'm just going to note that you submitted the old EAF and it should be the new EAF because it's after January 1st.
You know, I saw
Oh, it changed over the year?
It changed. So, I mean, the changes aren't very significant, so
Right.
you could probably just submit the pages that change, or
I'll take a look at that, okay.
It's interesting because I guess you're saying because they got the EAF mapper in the end of 2018, that it wasn't, that it's different than, I didn't think they made changes in January. I thought they just implemented the regulations. And, because I compared the forms side by side and I didn't see the changes, but I mean, I admit I didn't read
there's a slight
line by
change.
line.
There's a few slight changes.
Okay. Okay.
Well,
You know what
I mean,
pages.
I guess
think
I'm
the
not
historic
1,000%
section,
sure,
maybe.
but, you know, if we were applying for a building permit, we would use the forms and the regulations at the time of submission. I don't know if it would be appropriate to redo the whole thing.
It
That's a
would
legal
be.
question.
The DEC has provided guidance that says you have to use the new forms unless you have a neg deck as of
Unless you have a
January
neg
1st.
deck, okay. Yeah, I just didn't know that they had changed.
I think it's just a couple of pages that
It's
changed.
just very minor changes. So like I said, I don't think it should prevent circulation. I
No.
think they should just get us the amended pages.
So we can attach those additional pages or
Yeah.
change pages.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'm not even sure that the changes impact you.
Well, they don't. I just want to be.
But we want to make sure we have the right one. I
Using
know
the
it-
right form.
So just to
Yeah.
remember, this is in the
We're
event that
sending
we are
it to
sued.
DEC, so-
If we have the wrong EAF, that's a procedural defect and we lose automatically. So we don't want that to happen.
I
So
understand.
If the DEC is saying if they don't have a neg deck before January 1st, use it, then let's use it. Because we want to make sure we have a perfect record in case of loss.
Oh, that's good
We've been
to know.
sued twice. We won both times and on appeal because we have a good record.
They won't be the first project to.
So who has this resolution?
I do.
Thank you.
Resolution classifying the action and referring the action to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development, resolution number 2018-67, whereas 8 times, now therefore be it resolved that the planning board hereby, 1, classifies the project as an unlisted action under seeker, 2, declares its intent to serve as lead agency in a coordinated review of the project and directs its secretary to circulate notice of its intent to all other involved and interested agencies. 3, directs its secretary to refer the application to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development pursuant to Section 239-M of the General Municipal Law.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. And may I get a motion to set a public hearing for this application for April 17th?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
That's not going to line up precisely with the 30 days that county and everybody else has to, but I think we should go ahead and start the public hearing at that point.
Sure.
We received some correspondence today from neighbors, and I think that hearing from
April 7th.
everyone will help guide
Right.
how the project proceeds, et cetera. So,
I did have a couple other clarifications on the comments,
Sure.
if we could. So I had, sorry. Oh, for the erosion control permit, this comment came up twice. I guess I thought when
can
we
you tell
had
us,
first.
can you give us the number? Just so we
Yeah,
can find
this
it?
is number 17. So I guess I thought when I had met with Tad that there wasn't necessarily a form for the erosion control permit, but the site plans that we submit as a part of the site plan application are the application, but we do need to provide a fee. Is there an actual application form
Yeah,
we are
have
supposed to
a
be
form.
submitting for
Yeah,
that?
we have a form.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's just hold off until we figure out whether it's the
All those
SWIP
calculations.
Right, okay, hold
application
off till
or
the end. Okay.
Erosion control permit application. Yeah, I mean, you know, like it's simple, it's only probably 2 pages long.
Right, okay. So there was a comment that says, or actually, you know what, I'll just clarify that directly later. That doesn't. And then another one was a request to specify materials and colors of the equipment pad. In our offline meeting, we had talked about the fact that the equipment pad is located in the interior of the array, so visually speaking, you wouldn't really see it from the outside. And we had provided heights on the detail, the typical equipment pad detail here.
Is that typical, or is that what's proposed? Because again,
Typical.
you're going to get in trouble.
It's typical, because that is, the design of that is something that wouldn't be completed until the building permit level. It's very electrical heavy, and so this is typical. But I don't expect the height to change much, and it's still going to be at the center of the array.
Yeah, again, we need to get guidance from the utility company, and that doesn't happen until later in the process.
So we haven't had this issue with any of the other solar applications we've reviewed. They've actually.
Have you compared their equipment pad to their exact plans after they built it?
No one's built it yet.
No one's built yet.
I mean, it's going to change. Whatever they gave you initially
I
is
haven't
going to get
signed,
tweaked.
I have not signed one yet.
Right.
They're still working to meet conditions.
On-
So, but I'm trying to, I will say it once again, the chairman's being as nice as I can be about this. If you make a lot of changes, I don't care that the utility is the one dictating it, you will not get a CO.
Mhm.
It's as simple as that,
Mhm.
without coming back for a site plan amendment. And I'd like to avoid that for you.
Right.
That's all.
I think
So what can we do to be
Talk to
general
Tad-
enough?
Talk to Tad, because
Talk to Tad, okay.
this is, once it's through the board, except to Tad, if there are minor field changes, we changed the code even though we can't seem to find the section.
On one of ours, we had, I'm pretty sure it was Enclave Solar. We had, because they were also asking about how do we deal with this, because it might change. They produced a photograph that corresponded to the different views or the pad layout, and it showed up fine when it was printed in color. So we asked them to specify, you know, what's the color? Is it gray? Is it white? What are we looking at here?
But does it matter if no one's going to see it except for the people that work there?
It's part of the construction, I mean, the site plan elements.
Right,
Yeah.
we're supposed to see all materials labeled. That's basically it.
If you put a little shed in the middle, surrounded where nobody could see it, we'd still want to know the materials and color of the shed.
There are people at other elevations that might see it.
Can look down and see stuff too,
Mhm.
particularly the neighbors across South Quaker, because they're at a higher level. And again, I'm trying to sort of forewarn you because I know how this works. We changed the code so that Tad can declare something de minimis, and she usually consults with at least me, a couple of consultants to make sure, because she doesn't like to actually consider something de minimis. We did have on an earlier application that we approved, Central Hudson required them to put the battery thing in.
Right.
So the equipment pad doubled in size.
That's a big change. That would be
It's-
different.
Actually, I
Than
was
like
able
using
to,
one
I was able to work Tad into
manufacturer.
agreeing that it was de minimis.
It's not a de minimis. The board is accepting it tonight
Tonight.
as a change to the site plan.
Right.
She would not.
Well, until she
find
sees it. Until she sees it, she wouldn't say it's de minimis because it's not, it's just
Right.
proposed right now,
So one of the things you could do is just be prepared to submit a site plan amendment at some point once you have those details figured
Right,
out, so
right.
that there's, while you're building out, the board can be reviewing that amendment, but, you know, there's always the risk the board will ask for some changes.
Well, I think, you know, the main concern here is visual impact, right? So we could provide you with photos of other projects that we've worked on that,
My
you know,
concern is
and-
not
and the
visual
equi-
impacts. My concern is how to get you through Tad.
Well,
Let me
and
just
having
speak
an
bluntly.
accurate site plan. I mean,
But-
with all projects, they always request every aspect of the project be shown on the plan,
Yeah.
so.
But I guess what I'm saying is if the rating on a particular piece of equipment is changed by the utility, but we provide you with photos of other similar projects and equipment pads, so the color scheme is
Right.
virtually identical, and, you know, the size and the scope of the pad are very similar.
I was going to say,
but some
that
of
would be,
this-
that would be generally acceptable to Tad.
Okay.
I know from past experience from working with her for
If
14
you
years.
change something from green to purple,
Alarm
that's
bells
gonna
go
be
up.
an issue.
Okay.
If you say it's
Yeah.
going to be gray and then it's school bus yellow, alarm bells go up with Tad.
Yeah, but the majority is gray. We can say that right now.
That's what we
Sometimes
assume.
That's kind of what we
Yeah.
anticipated.
Yeah.
That's what we anticipated, but if you don't label it, we don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
If there's-
Years
Like on the other
ago-
one, there was a photograph, and one of the colors looked white when it was
Right.
printed in black and white.
That's right.
So we had them label it so that we would know that it was intended to be a gray. So,
Okay, so
There was a
we'll
business in
clarify.
town for years, it's still here, thriving, but the original site plan did not specify colors or materials, and the owner would, on a whim, just change things. So we went from purple, orange, and green
Yep.
to red and yellow.
Yep.
And the owner came back in, so now we have a record of every materials, because I would get people calling me, how could you let that be purple, orange, and green? I'm like, because there was no record, they can do what they want to do.
Okay.
That's why we try to have everything labeled, so it's not to kill you, I promise.
Yeah.
But again, I would just talk to Tad about it, but I think what you're talking about sounds fine, where we
Yeah.
have it typical, as long as the colors stay the same, it doesn't matter to her if it's a Q10 or whatever.
Yeah.
But as long as the pads stayed roughly the same, that
And the
kind of thing.
height.
Yeah, and the height, because otherwise, once they get to be too big, if it doubles, then she usually say, go back for an
Right,
amendment.
okay, yeah.
I mean, the other thing that, you know, these solar arrays are still kind of new, as we've noted, nobody's actually built anything yet. We've
In
had a
this
slew of
town.
them in this town, but we've had several applications. We're in the middle of conditions of approval for a few, but the board has, even with non-solar things, really tended to every little detail, and every chance the board gets, they're trying to make sure that the look of a project from the
Yes.
surrounding neighborhood, so it's kind of across the board, and it, you know, so the idea here is, if the community would like to see solar become an acceptable thing, the idea is to try to tend to all these details, so that we can say, look,
So
this
they're
could
not
work,
eyesores.
you know.
Please.
And to piggyback onto Liz's comments, the one thing I did forget to mention, it was around the discussion of the pollinators under the panels. That really is important. And I agree, I don't see where it's disturbing. I mean, and if it's it softens the view, and I think that's important. I think the last time I had asked you, because I know one of them was thinking of having sheep on their property as a way of maintaining the grasses. I mean, anything that helps soften and makes it part of the rural character that it has been is like a nice idea.
Yeah, no, I'm a supportive. I was just worried that the comment was requiring us to strip the site, and that just creates complications.
No. Scatter. We don't want that either. Let me assure you.
Got it.
Keep the topsoil.
Yeah, scatter.
Yeah. That's fine.
You may believe you're a flower girl, going down and throwing.
Okay. Great.
So,
and then my last question was on the decommissioning plan and the decommissioning costs. If we were to provide that to the planning, I guess my read on the zoning board is that that's a town board review and approval. Procedurally,
you must present it to us and to them. We must make a recommendation. So nothing in this town operates where that's their jurisdiction versus ours, or very rarely.
Right.
Any of these issues, they look to us for comment. In advance, I believe I told you this early on. The board has been taking the position that we're not requiring bonding for these applications. Bonds are, we think, better done for short term rather than 20, 40-year leases because you have to renew them, and it's a nightmare for the town as well. So what we've suggested is that and the town board agreed, is that they enter into an agreement with you so that in lieu of decommissioning, if you don't do it, if you walk away, then they have the right to go in and decommission everything, get rid of everything, sell, whatever, and then add that back to the owner's tax bill as a tax lien.
So do we need to present separately to them, or is this kind of passed on to them?
At some point, yes.
At some point, you'll need to present separately to them. And we have, Cynthia, do we have a good sample now for what that might look like?
A decommissioning, you mean plan sheet?
Yeah, we should wait, but we can give you guidance on it, because it was the first out of the gates that was taking them a while to go back and forth. But basically, it's a three-way agreement between the town, the operator, and then the actual site owner.
Right.
We don't anticipate that you're going to skip for what I've read, these should be able to go on longer than what the estimated life is, depending on how you maintain it. So, and I'll also point out, just too, for anybody listening or watching, the town was the first one in the county to pass a specific law to basically encourage this, I think. So it's presumptive that that's what the town is looking for, is to help provide these kinds of alternative energy sources. Because I know other towns in the county, before they pass these laws, you've had to go through the public utility use chart and just a regular site plan review. So that's why we created what they did here, to make it actually expedite the process. So again, I think it'll take you far less time to get through the town board, because this was all open negotiations. They weren't sure of it. We also had a new assessor for the pilot. So now they have kind of a formula down in their heads of what they want to see. So, and you have to negotiate also specifically with the school board yourselves. That's not us. The school district has been negotiating with the other solar applications to make sure that they're acceptable as well for the pilot. But all that's usually done after you leave us.
But plus, in terms of process, we get the decommissioning plan sheet, we get the estimate. I have one of the engineers take a look at it, say, yeah, that's looks okay. Quick note on that, in a lot of them, they've offered in the estimate the salvage value and having that beat. So you can do that, but we're just going to turn around and say, well, that's not going to be part of whatever the agreement is with the town board. But in any case, so starting
That's why we make the recommendation to them for it.
Okay.
They pretty much trust us on that. So
Okay.
I'll tell you.
So what would be the general timeline for engaging them directly?
Did you say you submitted something today for?
Decommissioning? No, what I had included was some preliminary correspondence with the DOT and the DEC.
Okay. As soon as you have it, you can go ahead and get started with them.
Okay.
They'd like to. The town board would like to go ahead and work out the maintenance agreement or the decommissioning agreement, any maintenance agreements, and the pilot as soon as possible. So in that, the pilot, as I said, is just from me sitting in on the meetings before with the town board, because they're not offline meetings, not the full town board. In both cases, the solar proponent had already met with the school district and then was meeting with the town to make sure that both agree.
As far as the kind of template decommissioning plan, you have a time frame when you think that'll kind of be on your ballot fully? Just, you know, we have one prepared, but if you have one that's already kind of been vetted, I think it'd be.
There's one that's been approved by the town board. It's not signed, but I think it's foilable, right, if they approved it. So probably in the next few weeks.
Next few
We'll
weeks,
have
okay.
a complete, fully executed model
Okay.
that the town board found acceptable that you could take a look at.
In other words, you know, all the attorneys, when they want to prove in form and substance, most of them have sort of an idea of what that form and
Right.
substance is, and this way you could piggyback on it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think that'd be very helpful.
So, and I'll talk to the supervisor as soon as they sign it, we can get you a copy of it.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Who's handling that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anything else? Then we'll see you back on April the 17th?
So when you drop off your packets for circulation, just make sure you have sufficient packets. It's best for Cynthia if you put them all together. So the packets with the EAF and the plans, et cetera. Include your new revised EAF pages, envelopes with addresses, and then you'll have to upload the one to SHPO yourself.
Right.
They don't accept a referral from us directly to them anymore. Sad to say.
They've gone high-tech.
They have. Thank you
Thank you very
much.
much.
Look forward to seeing you again. The next item on the agenda, Mr. Bikert, so patiently waiting all this time. My goodness. Nice to see you.
See you.
I'm
no stranger to waiting.
So, briefly, the owners, the urgency one in moving to the new building that's going up, the lovely new building that's going up quickly on Route 9, there was an area that we all discussed at the time with the owners of the site where the sign would go, and it was between the two gables.
Right.
The owners, the emergency one said, wait, that doesn't lead you into anything. We'd rather have it above the door. And also, if you look at Mavis, theirs is also above the door. This tends to be something that's typical. So because this was part of a site plan, Ms. Moss decided that they should come in for a site plan amendment because it was specific to the building itself. You've all had a chance to see where Mr. Bikert has moved the sign. It's now over to the left, but they squished it, rather than smushed it, and widened it so that it could go lower, because I had expressed that some planning board members might not be happy losing the keyhole. In addition, I heard from a couple of members that now it was weighted to the left too much, so it was suggested that they add 3 more gooseneck lamps to the right gable, which has now been proposed. And as long as they were coming in for a site plan amendment, they were still trying to resolve landscaping and the sidewalk issues to tie in with the new town sidewalks. And also, we had, I guess, erred mistakenly by the fact that the note about the canopy on the former Grand Union / Amos Market was left off. And originally it was discussed that we would have it taken down. That was supposed to have been the note, but in the interim, we learned that there's no brick behind it. If you take it down, it's not going to look attractive. So it was proposed that they repaint it, and the applicants agreed. So we have a resolution prepared that takes all this into consideration. And the zoning administrator did recommend that we waive a public hearing, which we're allowed to, on the site plan amendment itself. So I kind of took all your steam, I'm sure. What would you like to add?
Do I need to add anything? I did one consent in a couple of emails back and forth. I just wanted to show you guys, and I'll leave this with the board. I have a copy. These are the typical brand colors, and there was some discussion about maybe toning those back and being a little bit more subdued with respect to the building and the environment and the historic nature of the town. So we were thinking about going to a less saturated color. I mean, I'm not sure if we're required to do that, but I just thought I would take it.
You were really nice to propose it. I just passed on to you what I heard from other people. I didn't make that comment about the colors. But does the board, are you joining agreement?
But anyway,
that
I mean,
the-
I think I would do it anyway. I just think it would look better on the building,
I think so,
considering the
too.
dark
I think so.
trim,
I
the
think
so, too.
stone, the
We all
natural
agree.
colors. This would kind of look
Right.
almost
Garish.
like an urgent care center or
Yes.
something like that. I don't know.
Warning, emergency, emergency.
That's good. McDonald's.
Like I said, you didn't hear it from me.
I know. Well, I know. I'm not just saying, just the email that we had back and forth, there was a comment about it, and I just thought we would
And I-
address it, and we have no problem doing
I
that.
sent those out too, and I mean, some people said, oh, I don't like them, I like the other ones better. I'm like, huh? But the other, I think I heard from a majority that they like the new colors, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a desire to have a visual presence, just because of the business that they're in and trying to make sure that people are aware of it. That's why we really fought hard to have it over the doorway. I think early on in the project, our client, Emergency One, was at the meeting, but there's so many other issues, they tend to not focus on, they focus more on getting it approved than,
As
you
I
know, the
said to
signage
you,
is such a minor thing.
The issue is on this, at this particular site, we all were fine with the front building where they're going into. The back
Mhm.
two were the other ones that were at issue, and so I know that your clients were at the first two going, oh, look, they like it, fine, we're through.
Yeah.
So they didn't come to the rest of the meetings, and you're right, the signage wasn't discussed with them apparently, so.
Well, I'm sure it's not because of the hospitality of the board that they don't like to be here.
Thank you.
So, 'cause I always find it entertaining.
Thank you.
And educational. So, the only other thing we did was we added like a bronze border that I'm assuming it's going to be bronze, but I have to check the specification. It may be black or a dark,
To match.
to match the window trim. It doesn't show on any of these drawings because I've never been provided with a color rendering. But I was told that the window trim and I think the soffit trim is going to be a dark color, so
Supposed to be.
I'll get that. So that's going to match. I did also bring the letters will be all dimensional because it's going over beadboard. I can't put an applied or painted letter on it. So the Emergency One is the 5-pond composite, similar to the other composite materials I'm sure you're familiar with, in a 1/2-inch thickness. The smaller letters, because of their size, as we go down, we usually reduce the thickness, the letter
So it's a
thickness.
quarter
So the
inch?
same stuff. One is 1/4 inch, one is 1/2 inch. It's pretty well proportioned to the size, height of the letter. And I can leave these samples with the board if the board.
I don't think that's
wishes to.
necessary,
So-
not in
Okay.
this case.
And then the lighting, I really can't comment on. I believe, it's my understanding that that lighting will match the other buildings.
It does.
So they have a specification. You'd mentioned you
They
have
do.
that. And I don't know anything about the landscaping, but I'm sure it'll be
That's-
lovely.
There's, the real discussion on landscaping was basically that what we'd approved didn't match what the town is doing with more funding along the way. So it's an attempt to have them put in some minimal landscaping that can later on be relocated, because the town's going to actually have some input in this too, but it has to be approved by DOT. That's what's taking a while. We thought they might
Understood.
get through at the same time. So any comments from the consultants? I'm doubting it. I should have mentioned that also that there's a removal of the planter box that was originally proposed around the monument sign that's on Route 9. There's not really enough room there to grow much, and of course.
Oh, we're on to
Yeah, this is just the overall site plan.
One thing we should just talk about when we do the approval resolution, or when you consider the approval resolution, is the timing of the awning and it being painted. Is that going to be linked to a building permit or CO for any particular building, or will it wait to be
Yeah,
the
well, it
last
should be.
item?
Should be as soon as possible.
So that's something that we just need to figure out for the resolution.
Okay.
So link it to building 5, or,
What it's linked to right now is just final CO, so it would be the last thing that could be done. So we'll discuss that. So
think, is it
even though we're waiving a public
Emergency
hearing,
1.5?
we have to refer this to county planning. You're aware of the site plan amendment, so I can't give you a resolution tonight
I think
of
for
approval,
emergency
but
1 is 5.
let me ask, any comments from my colleagues about the sign?
I have one, because in full disclosure, I must confess in front of all of my colleagues. Oh, hold on, Ann. I was greatly opposed to the change of the sign in the agenda meeting, and I made my views quite clear about it, and it was really the aesthetics of it. And listening to my colleagues, I reluctantly went out, drove by, parked by the bank, stood across the street for 2 days, going back and forth, looking at Emergency 1 and looking at Mavis, going, Okay, it's not as bad as I thought. I have changed my opinion. Reluctantly, but I have changed.
Well, thank you. We
You're
did have
welcome.
B-board too, so there's
No,
that.
but it comports really well with the other signage on the
Well,
side.
I think it should. I mean, it's one plaza, and, you know, to have a unified look is, I mean, if we were doing the plaza,
Can't you
the
just do all
signage
the
for the
signs in Hyde
entire.
Park? Can't you just do?
Yeah, right?
Well, I mean, I wish I was called in sooner.
Yes, I agree.
Well, we are doing a project in Poughkeepsie for emergency one, and we're like a month ahead. So we'll see how that goes. There's no way for me to really move forward with these signage with any degree of certainty in order to make their mid-April move-in date, is there?
It won't be approved.
No.
But
Okay.
did you hear anything up here that would make you think that there would be uncertainty?
No.
I mean, colleagues?
No.
Especially after my confession.
It's illegal for us to tell you how we're going to
Of
vote.
course.
But I always tell applicants, you should be able to tell from the general tone of comments
Sure.
you hear. And since I didn't hear anything negative, in fact, matter, I heard a confession. Someone who's gone from negative to positive?
Sure, yeah.
All right. Well, they're moving along pretty quickly when I drove by today, and
Yeah, they are.
good, right?
No, they are.
I
mean,
I
they've
just
had-
want to make sure that we can.
They've had people working, I mean, I can only say that legally, again, you can proceed, but at your own risk.
Everything I do is at my own risk.
But I don't believe that there should be any
Okay.
impediments to the sign.
Good to know.
If there were, I think you would have heard them tonight.
Yeah, the very quick construction timeline. I was impressed
So
with
the board
how far they've gotten.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
The board may want to ask its secretary to ask for expedited review on the planning on this
Yes.
one.
We can.
DC planning? Do we want to amend? We don't need to amend it.
Yeah,
No, no.
this is just to
It's a-
circulate it.
It's a,
Oh, this
informal.
is this your file?
yes.
Aha. Ms. Wasser.
Okay. Resolution classifying the action and referring the application to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development. Hyde Park Town Center North, Buildings 3, 4, and 5. March 20th, 2019, Resolution Number 16-15H. Whereas, now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Board hereby, 1, classifies the amended site plan as a Type 2 action under SECRA, and 2, directs its secretary to refer the amended site plan to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development pursuant to Section 239M of the General Municipal Law.
There a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
We can't take action until we hear back from them, but we will ask for an expedited review, and as soon as we have a resolution prepared, I'll forward it to you.
Okay, we'll wait to hear from you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now that I know you just
So-
live in Rhinebeck, I don't feel
Wait,
so guilty that
Are you gonna, are you gonna vote to waive the public hearing?
Sign that?
Oh, oops.
Oh.
Wait. This is the real one?
Yes. The real one. And then give it to me. Are you going to fill that out, Stephanie? What?
Yes.
You'll fill that rest of it
May I get a
out?
motion to waive the public hearing based on the recommendation of the zoning administrator?
So
Where does
moved.
that-
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
I'm
Aye.
not sure it's supposed to be, so you can tell me
So it could be, if we get this back quickly, it could be in 2 weeks.
Oh, perfect. Thanks. That works for our timeline.
The next item on the agenda is Salt Point Solar. This is the, first, the application expired, but we had a timely request for an extension. And basically, the extension is required because the town board, the way they meet, they didn't have time for Aileen to actually sign the document that you're referring to. It was just voted on that she could sign it, so they can't meet all their conditions until the town board takes action. In the meantime, we also have the doubling of the equipment pad that's proposed in the center of the site. And even though Tad indicated in a meeting that we had that she would consider it de minimis because she hasn't seen it yet, it's going to be a field change, she did not want to opine in advance. So what they asked for is just an acknowledgement by the board that it's been enlarged, which this resolution takes care of. Any questions?
So this is that pad that we were talking
Yeah.
about, yes.
It turned it from like the size of a small truck to a big truck, maybe, or like a train car. That's basically what it did.
Because of the battery?
Yeah, because the battery, and
The
again,
battery
this
pad, yeah.
is, as it was explained to me, Central Hudson, when they have a crisis where they need to have more energy, say sent down the grid to the city or something, it takes a while to get everything pumping back up for it to travel down. And so if they have battery storage, it's not for the site itself. It's to be able to upload various sites so that you can get energy quickly in case of an emergency, which makes sense, actually. So
Which we've
Sounds
had
like a
few of
prime
around
example of-
lately.
Well, we've had a few of those around here, it's true. So who has this this resolution?
I do. Town of Hyde Park Planning Board, resolution granting extension of the time to satisfy conditions of site plan and acknowledging de minimis change to site plan. Salt Point Solar, March 20th, 2019, resolution number 2018-01C. Whereas, and a bunch of more whereases. Now therefore be it resolved that the planning board hereby grants the applicant a 90-day extension of time in which to satisfy the conditions of site plan and special use permit approval to and including June 3rd, 2019. Be it further resolved that the planning board hereby acknowledges the de minimis change to the conditionally approved site plan to include the installation of the battery backup and directs the applicant to depict the battery backup on the final site plan, which is submitted for signature.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
The motion carries. The next item on the agenda would be, we need to send a comment letter to the
right.
town board on the downtown core rezoning. Has everyone had a chance to review it?
Yeah.
Any comments that I need to incorporate?
I must admit, I did not review it yet.
And I haven't made it all the way through. But it is beautiful.
So.
And I do trust your recommendation. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
I need a vote to authorize me to send something, but I'm not sure what I'm going to be sending because I haven't heard.
Well, I mean, you could ask the board for an extension and say that you'll be responding at your next meeting, just because the board hasn't had a chance to fully review it.
And that's what I will do.
And, I mean, they could act with it or without that.
Okay.
In the interim, I just want to tell everybody, there are a couple of changes that may happen to the zoning, even before the public hearing is set. For example, we set a width of sidewalks of 5 or 6 feet, and in some areas, what's envisioned is actually a 10-foot wide sidewalk. So they're looking at the sub-areas to say, wait a minute, if we carry this through all the way, we're not going to get what we want in the pictures. So it's one of those things that just kind of slip by because it's so detail-oriented.
Yes.
So there are a few things that are still being analyzed, so I think the town board actually won't mind giving us an extension for us, and that way I can incorporate individual specific comments. And there's a lot to go through.
There's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
And I've been working through it for a while, and.
Thank you.
Well, no, but our first fear when I saw it, I was like, can we condense this any? The good news is that it really does provide very clear direction for an applicant. I mean, it's, you know where to put the building and what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
So, in addition, I will repeat, because I can't repeat it often enough, this zoning is based on the idea that we would get sewer district formed.
Right.
And that's critical. And there is a waiver, so if the sewer doesn't exist or never happens or whatever, that you can still get a waiver for all those types of buildings. But if we get sewer, the changes that could happen in the middle of town, the increase in density, all of it, you want to be prepared for that because I'm hoping that'll happen.
It's not going to look good.
Yes, so I will request, by the way, I believe our liaison is here tonight, Councilman Krupnik. Welcome, thank you for joining us.
Hi.
I hope everyone knows that we have a new councilman.
Yes.
There you go. Yes. And there being no other business, may I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Thank you, colleagues. Thanks, consultants. Thanks, everybody.
And did you fill it in for me?
So, Michael,
Yeah.
on the way here,
I have a bad
I was
cold.
telling.
I have my game tonight.